I had $850 from my father's education fund taken by my stepmother drove me to the edge. The truth I uncovered flipped her entire scheme on its head. The grandfather clock in the dining room ticked with metronomic precision, each sound reverberating through my chest as I sat ramrod straight in my childhood home. My fingers traced the edge of the polished walnut table, muscle memory from 1,000 family dinners. Lorraine sat across from me, her platinum blonde hair pulled into a severe bun that made her features look stretched and tight. Mason and Chloe flanked her like bodyguards, forming a united front I hadn't expected for what should have been a routine discussion about my master's program. "Thank you for coming, Harmony." Lorraine's voice was clinical, devoid of warmth. "We have an important matter to discuss regarding your education fund." I nodded, optimism blooming despite the tension. "I've already researched the application process. The deadline for fall admission is next month. And that won't be necessary." Lorraine folded her hands on the table. Her French manicure caught the light from the chandelier overhead. "The trust has underperformed. The crypto and tech stock crash wiped out most of it." The words hung in the air. I waited for the punchline, for someone to laugh and tell me they were joking. "What?" The word escaped as barely a whisper. Mason shifted in his chair, his Rolex glinting as he adjusted his cuff. "Market volatility," Lorraine said. "Nobody could have predicted it." She nodded. "We've salvaged what we could, but there's only enough for one more semester of tuition. The living expenses portion, the $30,000 per year, that's gone." The clock's ticking grew louder. My hands turned cold, like all the blood had rushed to my core. I stared at the familiar face of the woman who had been my stepmother for 6 years, searching for some hint of regret or compassion, finding only cool detachment. "That's not possible," I whispered. "Dad set up that trust with $1.5 million. My father's face flashed in my memory, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners as he leaned across this very table on my 19th birthday. "Your future is ironclad, sweetheart," he'd promised, sliding the trust document across to me. "This will carry you through your master's, maybe even a doctorate if you want. No matter what happens to me, you'll always be taken care of." Michael West had been meticulous in everything he did. His architectural firm had designed half the notable buildings in downtown Austin, each structure standing as testament to his attention to detail. Our home, this 5-bedroom Tudor with its soaring ceilings and custom woodwork, was his masterpiece, the physical manifestation of the perfect life he'd built for us. Before the cancer took my mother, I was 14 when Morgan West played her Steinway for the last time. The music had filled our home like oxygen, her fingers dancing across the keys even as her body failed her. I closed my eyes and could still hear her favorite Chopin nocturne, could still picture Dad sitting beside her on the bench, his hand on her back, supporting her when her strength waned. After she died, something changed in him. He worked longer hours, threw himself into bigger projects. The only time he truly seemed himself was on Friday nights, when my Uncle Arthur would come over with stacks of pizza boxes and his laptop. Code and pizza night, they called it. Arthur, my mom's older brother, was the tech genius of the family, always trying to pull Dad into his latest startup venture. "You're too locked into the physical world, Mike," he'd tease, waving a slice of pepperoni in the air. "The future is digital." Their friendship fractured during Mom's final months. Arthur had pushed for experimental treatments, had researched cutting-edge trials and flown in specialists. Dad had wanted to focus on Mom's comfort, on giving her peace in her final days. The argument I overheard 3 weeks before she died still haunted me. "You're giving up on her," Arthur had shouted. "I'm respecting her wishes," Dad had replied, his voice breaking. "Not everyone wants to die hooked up to machines in some clinical trial, Arthur." They never fully reconciled. And then, 5 years later, Dad's private plane went down in a storm over New Mexico. I was 19, suddenly orphaned with only Lorraine, the financial consultant he'd married 2 years after Mom's death, as my guardian. The will had been specific. Lorraine would act as trustee of my education fund until I turned 28, to ensure financial guidance during Harmony's formative years. I'd never questioned it. Dad knew best. Dad had it all planned out. Dad had been wrong. Where did the money go? My voice shook now, the reality of my situation sinking in. That fund was supposed to be in conservative investments, low-risk bonds. Lorraine sighed. Your father, bless him, wasn't as financially savvy as he believed. The initial investment strategy was too conservative to keep pace with inflation. We had to make some adjustments. We? The word caught in my throat. Financial advisors, she said dismissively. The point is, we did what we could to salvage the situation, but after the tech correction last quarter, she trailed off, spreading her hands in a gesture of helplessness. My stomach churned. Can I see the financial statements? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Chloe, who had been examining her nails with studied boredom, suddenly looked up, interest flickering across her face. Lorraine's expression hardened. I am offended. Your father trusted my financial expertise. It's sad you don't. Sounds like someone needs to get a real job, Mason scoffed, leaning back in his chair. My cheeks burned. I have a job. I work 20 hours a week at the campus library while maintaining a 3.9 GPA. A real job, Mason repeated, smirking. Not some student work-study handout. Chloe returned to studying her manicure, clearly bored by my financial crisis. The message couldn't have been clearer. I was an outsider here, an inconvenience to be dealt with and dismissed. I pushed back from the table, the chair legs scraping against the hardwood floor. I'll need to see those statements. It's my money. You'll need to consult with our attorney if you want to pursue this, Lorraine said coolly, though I wouldn't recommend it. Legal fees will eat up what's left of your fund rather quickly. The implicit threat hung in the air between us. I stood up, legs unsteady. I'll get my things. No one followed me as I climbed the stairs to my old bedroom, now a sterile guest room with no trace of my existence. I threw my few belongings into a duffel bag, mind racing. $400 in my checking account, rent due in 2 weeks, final exams in a month. On my way out, I passed the door to the basement storage room and froze. Something compelled me to look inside, perhaps a desperate need for connection to my past, to the parents who would never have let this happen. The light flickered on, illuminating the cavernous space, and there, in the center of the room, stood my mother's Steinway. But not I remembered it. The elegant black finish had been obliterated, painted over in a garish neon pink. Gold letter stickers spelled out "Vibes Only" across the fallboard. The keys were caked with paint, permanently glued together. Oh, that. Chloe's voice came from behind me. It's for my Instagram aesthetic. Vintage music gear is totally trending. I couldn't breathe. This piano, the instrument my mother had poured her soul into, desecrated, turned into a prop. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about erasing every trace that my family had ever existed. I walked out without another word, the front door closing behind me with quiet finality. In my truck, hands shaking on the steering wheel, I finally understood. I was completely alone. 2 days later, when no one thought I was back, I positioned myself in the attic. The attic had always been my refuge. Even now, as I methodically folded sweaters into a cardboard box marked "Keep," the familiar smell of cedar and old books offered false comfort. Through the small dormer window, gray clouds gathered over Austin, a perfect mirror to the storm brewing inside me. A floorboard creaked in the hallway outside the door. I froze, my fingers still gripping the sleeve of a University of Texas sweatshirt. No, Mason, listen. Lorraine's voice drifted through the thin door. That fund was a lifesaver. My new venture capital firm couldn't have launched without that $700,000 in seed capital. My lungs stopped working. The sweatshirt slipped from my grasp. But what if she figures it out? Mason's voice sounded tinny, likely on speakerphone. She's not exactly stupid. She'll never know. Lorraine's voice dropped lower, forcing me to inch closer to the door. By the time she's 28, it'll all be settled. Her father was so naive to think I'd let that money just sit there for her. A cold clarity washed over me, replacing the shock that had numbed my brain for the past hour. Without conscious thought, my fingers found my phone in my pocket. I tapped the record button, capturing the tail end of their conversation. The crypto story was a nice touch. Mason chuckled. People believe what they want to believe, Lorraine replied. Speaking of which, I need to find that Steinway paperwork if we can list it as an asset. Their voices faded down the hallway, but the recording remained, 30 seconds of undeniable truth. My father's widow hadn't just mismanaged my trust fund. She had stolen it. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at the stranger in the mirror. She looked like me, but her eyes held something I'd never seen before, a hardness that wasn't there this morning. My hands didn't shake anymore. The recording changed everything. Downstairs, I heard Chloe's high-pitched laugh as she FaceTimed someone in the kitchen. Yeah, totally redid it. The piano is like so aesthetic now. Had to scrape some of the black stuff off first. I checked my bank account on my phone. $417.32. The number glared back at me, suddenly pathetic in its inadequacy. Rent at my campus apartment was due in 12 days, $1,200, plus utilities, plus food. This wasn't just about losing my master's program, this was about survival. I stuffed the last of my clothes into the box, then slid it back under the eaves where it would remain, likely forgotten. All I took was a backpack with my laptop, textbooks, and the clothes I was wearing. My truck keys felt unusually heavy in my pocket as I crept down the back stairs. No dramatic goodbye, no confrontation. Not yet. The old Ford Ranger in the driveway had seen better days. The blue paint was faded to a dull gray in places, and the heater worked only when it wanted to, but it was mine, paid off 2 summers ago with waitressing tips. Lorraine's voice echoed in my head as I turned the key. That fund was a lifesaver. No, I thought as the engine rumbled to life. I'm the one who needs saving now. I drove without direction at first, numb hands gripping the steering wheel. Pride kept me from calling my friends. What would I say? That my stepmother had embezzled my inheritance? That I'd been effectively disowned? The humiliation burned hotter than the anger. Evening fell, and reality set in. I needed a place to sleep. The Planet Fitness parking lot was well lit and busy enough to feel safe. Inside, I counted out $10 bills from my wallet, my new monthly rent for shower access. The clerk didn't look up as he slid the membership card across the counter. 24/7? I asked. He nodded, still staring at his phone. Except holidays. Back in the truck, I rearranged what little I had. The passenger seat reclined partially, creating an uncomfortable but functional bed when combined with my jacket as a pillow. Tomorrow, I'd figure out the next step. Tonight, I just needed to survive. Rain started to patter against the windshield as I tried to sleep. I moved the truck to a corner of a Walmart parking lot where other vehicles were stationed for the night, a makeshift community of the displaced. By morning, my neck ached and my stomach growled. Campus buildings opened at 7. I could study there, use their Wi-Fi, stay warm during the day. I needed a job, multiple jobs. My phone buzzed, a calendar reminder for my shift at the library, the campus job that paid just above minimum wage, not nearly enough now. I called Olivia, my roommate from freshman year. We still got coffee occasionally, but we hadn't been close since she moved off campus. Hey, stranger. Her voice was bright, carefree. Hey, Liv. I forced normalcy into my tone. Quick favor, there's some black mold in my place and I need somewhere to send mail for a while. Could I use your address? Mold? That's awful. I pictured her wrinkling her nose. Of course you can. Do you need a place to crash too? The offer tempted me, but shame won out. No, I'm staying with family for now, just need a mailing address. Sure thing. You know where I live, right? The Blue Complex on Riverside? I jotted down the exact address, thanked her, and hung up before she could ask more questions. One small victory. The campus coffee shop had a help wanted sign in the window. The manager looked exhausted when I walked in. Can you start tomorrow, 4 a.m. shift? Jenna just quit. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Great, $8 an hour plus tips, mostly grad students at that hour. They tip decent. 4 a.m. I calculated the distance from the Walmart parking lot to campus, about 2 miles. Walking would save gas. By sunset, I'd secured a second job tutoring online and a weekend waitressing gig at a diner. 3 jobs, no home, and finals in 4 weeks. My first paycheck came a week later, $350 after taxes. I stared at it like it was a foreign object, this piece of paper that now stood between me and hunger. My feet were blistered from walking to save gas. My back ached from sleeping in the truck, but the check meant I could eat something besides coffee shop leftovers. As I folded the check into my wallet beside the recording of Lorraine's betrayal, something shifted inside me. This was no longer just about survival. It was about justice. And someday, when I had more than $417.32 in my checking account, Lorraine would learn what it meant to steal from a West. But first, I needed to make it through the night. The alarm on my phone jangled at 3:15 a.m., jolting me from a fitful sleep. For a split second, I forgot where I was. Then reality crashed back. The cramped truck cab, the parking lot, the bone-deep exhaustion. I fumbled with stiff fingers to silence the alarm before any security guard noticed the woman living in her pickup at the back of the Walmart lot. 4 months. 4 months since I walked out of my childhood home. Since Lorraine's smug face as she told me my education fund had underperformed. 4 months of this new life, this daily grind that had worn me down to something I barely recognized. My routine had the desperate precision of survival. By 3:45, I was in the coffee shop kitchen, tying my green apron with hands raw from cheap soap and winter air. The morning shift manager, Dennis, barely looked up as I clocked in. He didn't know I'd been sleeping in my truck. Nobody did. Except Olivia, who thought I was staying with a friend with mold problems. And even Olivia only knew I needed a mailing address. "Morning rush starts early today," Dennis muttered, already firing up the second espresso machine. "Those tech conferences bring in the caffeine addicts at dawn." I nodded and started the prep work, muscles moving automatically. My body remembered what to do even when my mind was foggy with exhaustion. Steam burns had become so common on my wrists that I'd stopped noticing them. The morning passed in a blur of paper cups and forced smiles. By 9:30, I'd clocked out and was driving across town to the public library, where I logged into my laptop for 3 hours of online tutoring sessions. College students willing to pay $20 an hour to have someone explain basic economics concepts to them. The irony wasn't lost on me, explaining financial principles while my own life had been financially destroyed. Between tutoring sessions, I studied for my final exams. The library was warm at least. Sometimes I dozed off between paragraphs, jerking awake certain everyone could see my shame. At 2 p.m., I retreated to the library bathroom to change into my waitress uniform for the diner, black pants, white shirt, the name tag that read Harmony in cheery script. I stared at my reflection in the smudged mirror, hollow cheeks, dull eyes with dark smudges beneath them. My collarbones jutted out sharply. I'd lost 15 pounds since that day in the dining room. The night shift at Dottie's diner stretched from 6 p.m. to midnight. My feet throbbed in cheap, non-slip shoes as I carried plates of meatloaf and mashed potatoes to truckers and late-night college students. The smell of food made my stomach clench, but I couldn't afford to eat here. I'd learned to live on the mistakes. The burger with the wrong cheese, the pancakes made when the customer changed their mind. The cook, Jerry, sometimes deliberately messed up an order near closing time, sliding the plate to me with a gruff, "Better not waste it." After midnight, I drove back to my current home, a different parking lot each night, rotating between Walmart, Home Depot, and a 24-hour grocery store on the edge of town. I'd learned which security guards looked the other way, which lots had the fewest overnight patrols. The knock on my window came at least twice a week, sometimes security, sometimes police. I'd perfected my story, just resting before I drive home, long shift. I kept my student ID visible. Most of them let me be. Some told me to move along. The fear never left. It sat in my chest like a cold, hard stone. Fear of being found out. Fear of failing my finals. Fear of the future stretching endlessly like this. Working 3 jobs and sleeping in a truck while the money from my father's trust fund sat in Lorraine's venture capital firm, and I slowly wasted away. Tonight, rain drummed against the roof of my truck. The temperature had been dropping steadily all week. The local news warned of an unusual cold front moving through Texas. I curled deeper into my sleeping bag, pulling my coat over that. The truck's heater hadn't worked properly since last month, and I couldn't afford to fix it. I woke up shivering. Not the normal kind of cold, but violent tremors that shook my entire body. My head throbbed. When I pressed my palm to my forehead, the skin burned against my icy hand. Outside, something white fell from the sky. Snow, in Austin. The weatherman called it a freak storm system, a once-in-a-decade event. For everyone else, it was an inconvenience or a novelty. For me, it might be a death sentence. I fumbled for my phone. The battery read 17%. My breath formed clouds in the air. The shivering wouldn't stop. This was rock bottom, curled in the back of a pickup truck during a snowstorm, burning with fever, with no one who knew where I was. No one who would miss me until I failed to show up for the morning shift. And even then, Dennis would just be annoyed at having to find coverage. I thought about my mother playing her Steinway, my father's hand on my shoulder as he promised my future was secure. I thought about Lorraine's cold eyes across the dining table and the neon pink monstrosity they had made of my mother's piano. The rage that usually warmed me had been replaced by a terrifying numbness. My thoughts moved slowly, like they were wading through molasses. This was bad. This was really bad. With shaking fingers, I pressed Olivia's contact. The phone rang 3 times before her sleepy voice answered. Harmony? It's like 4 in the morning. My teeth chattered so hard I could barely form words. I'm really sick. I'm in my truck. A pause. Then suddenly alert. Your truck? Wait, what? Where are you? Parking lot, Home Depot on Riverside. You're sleeping in your truck? What the... Harmony? I'm coming right now. Stay on the phone. I can't. Phone dying. Then text me your exact location. I'll find you. Don't hang up until you absolutely have to. I texted her the location pin and curled deeper into my sleeping bag. The shivering had become so violent it was almost like convulsions. It took Olivia 23 minutes to find me. Her headlights swept across my fogged windows, and then she was pounding on the door, her face a mask of shock and concern in the glow of her phone flashlight. Jesus Christ. Harmony. She yanked open the door and the blast of cold air made me gasp. Her warm hand touched my face and she recoiled. You're burning up. How long have you been living in your truck? 4 months, I whispered. Her face crumpled. Why didn't you tell me? Ashamed. Olivia helped me into her car and cranked the heat to maximum. I'm taking you to my place. My roommates will just have to deal. At her apartment, she half carried me inside. I was barely conscious by this point, aware only of warmth, blessed warmth, and Olivia's voice explaining to someone, she's my cousin, family emergency, she's really sick. I woke up on a couch under 3 blankets. Olivia sat beside me, pressing a cold cloth to my forehead. Your fever broke an hour ago. It was scary high, Harmony. I almost took you to the ER. Can't afford it, I mumbled. Yeah, I figured. Her voice was gentle but firm. So now you're going to tell me everything, and I mean everything. The story spilled out of me. Lorraine, the trust fund, the phone recording, the homelessness. With each word, something shifted inside me. The telling felt like lancing a wound, painful but necessary. When I finished, Olivia's eyes glittered with angry tears. You're staying here until we figure something out, period. My roommates can deal with it or I'll find a new place. But you're not going back to that truck, Harmony. You could have died out there. I knew she was right. The fever and the snowstorm would have been a deadly combination. But more than that, I knew something had fundamentally changed inside me. The fear wasn't gone, but it was different now. I'd survived the worst. I'd hit bottom and was still breathing. 2 days later, I was well enough to return to my jobs, but I moved my few possessions to Olivia's couch. I uploaded the phone recording to 3 different cloud storage services. I started a journal, documenting every interaction with Lorraine since my father's death. The homelessness, the fever, the rescue, they had forged something new and hard within me. I didn't just want to survive anymore. I wanted justice. A week passed. I was on the overnight shift at Dottie's Diner, still pale from the fever but steady on my feet. The bell above the door jingled at 3 a.m. I looked up from wiping down the counter, ready to greet another truck driver or insomniac college student. A man in an impeccably tailored suit stood in the doorway, looking wildly out of place among the vinyl booths and checkered floor. He scanned the nearly empty diner, his gaze landing on me with an almost physical impact. His eyes widened with recognition and shock. Harmony? He said, his voice cracking slightly. Is that you? My heart stopped. It was Uncle Arthur, my mother's brother, the man who had disappeared from my life after her death. And suddenly, I knew that everything was about to change. Uncle Arthur's face blanched under the harsh fluorescent lights of the diner. His fingers, adorned with a sleek titanium watch that probably cost more than my truck, gripped the edge of the laminate counter. My God, Harmony, he whispered, eyes scanning my face lingering on the hollows beneath my cheekbones. I've been looking for you for weeks. Your phone's disconnected. Your apartment vacant, I thought. His voice trailed off. The unspoken word hung between us. Dead. I wiped my hands on my stained apron, attempting to process his sudden appearance. Arthur Vance, tech millionaire, Morgan West's big brother, standing in a 24-hour diner at 3 a.m. The universe had a strange sense of timing. Sorry about the phone, I managed. Couldn't afford the bill. Arthur's gaze swept over my greasy uniform, the dark circles under my eyes. His jaw tightened. He glanced at my manager, who hovered near the kitchen, eyeing us suspiciously. When does your shift end? He asked. 5. I'm waiting, he said simply, sliding into a booth. And I want a coffee, black. The next 2 hours crawled by. I dropped 3 plates and mishandled 2 orders, hyper aware of Arthur's presence, his eyes tracking me across the diner. When my replacement arrived, I hung my apron and grabbed my backpack from the staff room. Arthur stood, leaving a $100 bill under his coffee cup. My car's outside, he said. The gleaming Tesla looked alien in the diner parking lot, next to my battered Ford Ranger. I hesitated, hand on my truck door. Leave it, Arthur said. We'll come back for it. The drive was silent. Austin's streets were empty at this hour, the traffic lights cycling through their colors for no one. Arthur navigated downtown, eventually pulling up to the grand limestone facade of the Driscoll Hotel. A valet appeared instantly. You're staying here? I asked unnecessarily. Of course he is, I thought. The Driscoll, where rooms started at $500 a night. SXSW, he explained, referring to the tech conference. Giving a keynote tomorrow, or today, I suppose. His suite swallowed me whole, 2 stories of old-world luxury, with polished wood, leather furniture, and windows overlooking the city I'd been surviving in. I stood awkwardly in the entryway, suddenly conscious of my stale diner smell, my unwashed hair. Showers through there, Arthur pointed. I'll order room service. The bathroom was bigger than the apartment I had lost. I stood under the scalding water until my skin turned pink, washing away months of truck stop sponge baths. When I emerged in one of the hotel's plush robes, a feast awaited on the dining table. Eggs, bacon, pancakes, fruit, orange juice, coffee. Enough for 6 people. Sit, Arthur commanded, pouring coffee. My hands trembled as I reached for a piece of toast. The first bite nearly made me cry. Real food, not leftover diner scraps or dollar menu burgers. You're going to tell me everything, Arthur said. Not a question, a requirement. Start with why my niece is working graveyard shifts and looking like she's been through hell. So I told him. Everything spilled out. The meeting with Lorraine, the crypto excuse, the trust's collapse, the neon pink piano. My voice caught when I described it. She painted Mom's Steinway, I said. The pain still caught me off guard. Neon pink for Instagram. Arthur's knuckles turned white around his coffee cup, but he didn't interrupt. I told him about the recording, the $700,000 Lorraine had stolen, about my truck, Planet Fitness showers, Walmart parking lots, 4 months of homelessness, the snowstorm, the fever that nearly killed me. His reaction wasn't what I expected. No shouting, no dramatic table pounding. Instead, a stillness settled over him, the kind of quiet that precedes natural disasters. You nearly died, he said finally, his voice flat. In a parking lot. While that woman lived in your father's house, spending your money. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. And now? He asked. What do you want to happen now? The question stunned me. What did I want? For months, I'd thought only about survival, about making it through each day. Want felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. I want, my voice faltered. Then the image of the pink piano flashed in my mind, and something hardened inside me. I want what's mine. I want her to pay for what she did. Arthur nodded, pulling out his phone. Roy, it's Arthur. I need you on the first flight to Austin. Family emergency. He hung up, turned back to me. She will fight back, you know. She will say you're lying, that you're unstable. Are you ready for that? I thought about my mother's piano, the keys fused together with garish paint, about sleeping in my truck while Lorraine sat in my childhood home, about the fever that racked my body while she invested my stolen money. I said. The words tasted like iron. Find everything. 24 hours later, Arthur's lawyer, Mr. Walker, arrived, tall and lean with silver hair, exuding the quiet confidence of someone who charged $1,000 an hour. He spread documents across the hotel suite's dining table, methodically building a case. We'll serve her with audit papers today, he explained. Emergency petition for an accounting of the trust. The recording gives us grounds. I nodded, watching him work. Arthur paced behind him, making calls, pulling strings I didn't know existed. How will she react? I asked. Mr. Walker looked up, his expression grim. Like a cornered animal, with everything she's got. He was right. Within hours, Lorraine's response arrived via courier. Mr. Walker scanned the document, his eyebrows rising slightly. Creative, he murmured. She's threatening to file a restraining order against Arthur on your behalf, claiming harassment and undue influence, says you're emotionally unstable, and Arthur is preying on your grief to steal the trust. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. That's ridiculous. It's smart, Mr. Walker corrected. She's establishing a narrative. Fortunately, he tapped his tablet, I've already filed for an emergency court order to freeze the trust. Judge Hernandez owes me a favor. The next 48 hours blurred into a frenzy of legal maneuvers. I slept on the suite sofa, afraid to leave as if this lifeline might vanish. Arthur worked remotely, canceling his SXSW appearance. Mr. Walker disappeared into meetings with bankers, auditors, forensic accountants. When he returned on the third day, his thin lips curved upward, the closest thing to a smile I'd seen from him. "We've got it," he announced, opening his briefcase. The audit found the $700,000 transfer, plus another $150,000 we didn't know about, total of $850,000. He laid out diagrams showing how the money had flowed through 3 shell companies before landing in Lorraine's new venture capital fund. She wasn't even particularly clever about it, Mr. Walker said. She just counted on you never finding out. Arthur examined the documents. What's her next play? Already happening, Mr. Walker replied, producing another file. Her team just provided these documents, supposedly authorizing the high-risk investments. He slid a paper toward me. Is this your signature? I studied the document, a formal letter authorizing Lorraine to invest trust funds in emerging technology ventures at her discretion. At the bottom sat what was supposed to be my signature. No, I said, my blood turning cold. I've never seen this in my life. Mr. Walker's smile grew wider, showing teeth for the first time. We've got her. This just went from civil fraud to multiple criminal felonies, forgery. He closed the file with a snap. She's done. Arthur placed a hand on my shoulder. You understand what this means? She's going to jail, Harmony, not just paying back your money, jail. I stared at the forged document, imagining Lorraine practicing my signature, calculating how to steal my future. For months I'd been consumed by survival, by fear. Now something else rose in its place, a clean, sharp rage that felt almost like relief. Good, I said. 3 days later, the conference room at Walker Associates felt like a battleground disguised as a mahogany sanctuary. I sat stiffly in a leather chair that probably cost more than every possession I currently owned. Across the gleaming table, Lorraine adjusted her cream silk blouse, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light as she leaned toward her attorney. Mason slouched beside her, thumbing through his phone with performative boredom. My palms sweated against my thighs. The weight of the past 4 months, the truck, the fever, the crushing fear, pressed down on me. Uncle Arthur's hand found my shoulder and squeezed once. A silent reminder, I was no longer alone. Let's begin. Mr. Walker's voice cut through the tension. At 72, he had the careful precision of a surgeon, and the voice of someone who had spent decades commanding courtrooms. Lorraine's attorney spoke first, a man with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice like honeyed steel. My client is prepared to discuss this matter today out of courtesy, but we must note for the record our intention to countersue for defamation and emotional distress. His gaze shifted to me. Miss West is clearly a troubled young woman who has fabricated these allegations. My heart thudded harder. 4 months ago, these words would have shattered me. Lorraine leaned forward, her features arranged in a mask of maternal concern. Harmony, sweetheart, I understand how difficult these past months have been for you, but these accusations... She shook her head, disappointed. Your father entrusted me with your financial welfare, and I've only ever acted in your best interest. The audacity stole my breath. In fact, she continued, her voice dropping to a confidential tone, Harmony repeatedly begged me to make riskier investments. She wanted the fund to grow faster. I advised against it, but she was adamant. The lie bloomed between us like a poisonous flower. I didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. Mason smirked, checking his Rolex. Can we wrap this up? Some of us have actual businesses to run. Mr. Walker remained unruffled. He placed a black leather binder on the table and slid it toward Lorraine's attorney. Before we proceed further, I believe you should review this information. His tone was conversational, almost friendly. I've organized it for your convenience. Lorraine's attorney frowned, but opened the binder. Mr. Walker didn't address Lorraine or Mason. Instead, he spoke directly to their lawyer, as if they were simply not important enough to warrant his attention. Tab 1 contains the complete audit trail of the trust established by Michael West. You'll note the systematic withdrawal of funds totaling $850,000 over a 20-month period. The attorney flipped through the pages, his expression unchanging, professional, unreadable. Tab 2 documents the formation of 3 shell companies, Vanguard Holdings, Premier Investment Group, and Sunbelt Enterprises, all signed by Lorraine West as primary officer. A muscle twitched in Lorraine's jaw. Her fingers drummed silently against the polished wood. Tab 3 contains the incorporation papers for Stratosphere Venture Capital. You'll note the primary capitalization source matches. Dollar for dollar, the funds extracted from Harmony's trust. The attorney's professional mask slipped for just a heartbeat. His eyes darted to Lorraine, then back to the binder. Tab 4 is perhaps the most illuminating. Mr. Walker nodded to me. I placed my phone on the table. My hands didn't shake anymore. I pressed play. Lorraine's voice filled the silence. That fund was a lifesaver. My new venture capital firm couldn't have launched without that $700,000 in seed capital. She'll never know. By the time she's 28, it'll all be settled. Her father was so naive to think I'd let that money just sit there for her. Lorraine's face drained of color, her aristocratic features hardening into marble. Mason's phone slipped from his fingers, clattering against the table. And finally, Tab 5. Mr. Walker's voice remained mild, almost bored. A comprehensive analysis from Margaret Daniels, the leading forensic handwriting examiner in the country. She confirms with 100% certainty that Harmony's signature was forged on all authorization documents for the high-risk investments you claim she begged for. The conference room fell silent. Lorraine's attorney slowly closed the binder and slid it away from himself, as if distancing himself from something radioactive. He leaned toward her and whispered urgently in her ear. For the first time, I saw her composure crack, the polished veneer of the financial expert, the concerned stepmother, the grieving widow, all of it gone. What remained was something raw and ugly. Mr. Walker slid a document across the table. Our terms are straightforward. Full restitution of the $850,000, plus $500,000 in punitive damages. You will liquidate your venture fund and sell the house. Harmony retains all rights to her father's intellectual property and personal effects. Lorraine's face contorted. You'll sign that? Or we'll... Mr. Walker interrupted, his voice still calm. You'll sign. Or this binder goes to the district attorney, who is already expecting my call. Forgery, embezzlement, criminal breach of fiduciary duty. You'll be in a cell by dinner. Mason's smugness evaporated. Mom? She silenced him with a glare, picked up the pen with fingers trembling not with fear but with rage. She signed her name with savage strokes, as if she could stab through the paper. As she dropped the pen, Mr. Walker added, "Oh, and the DA is getting the file anyway." Her head snapped up. "What? But we settled." "You settled the civil complaint," Mr. Walker said, smiling thinly. "My client isn't pressing criminal charges. The state of Texas is. They take a rather dim view of trustees who defraud their beneficiaries." The realization hit her like a physical blow. Her perfectly lined lips parted, but no sound emerged. 18 months, Arthur said quietly. His first words of the meeting. Minimum sentence for these crimes in Texas. That's if you cooperate fully. I stood, surprising even myself with how steady my legs felt. For months I'd imagined this moment, Lorraine's downfall, my vindication. I had expected to feel triumph, maybe even joy. Instead, there was something quieter. A settling of accounts, a weight lifting. "The piano," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, steady, adult. My mother's Steinway. I want it restored. Every trace of that pink paint removed. Lorraine's eyes narrowed, a last flash of defiance. "It'll cost thousands." "Yes," I agreed, "it will." I walked out without looking back, the sound of her fury fading with every step. In the hallway, sunlight streamed through tall windows. I paused and let the warmth touch my face. For the first time in months, I took a deep breath without pain. The war was over. I had survived. Morning sunlight spilled through the bay windows of my Palo Alto apartment, casting golden rectangles across the hardwood floor. 6 months since the settlement, and I still marveled at how different my life looked now. The cramped truck cab and 24-hour Walmart parking lots felt like scenes from someone else's story. I ran my fingers along the edge of my digital piano, a modest Yamaha that didn't compare to Mom's Steinway. But when I played Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, her favorite, something of her returned to me. The notes flowed from muscle memory, from a place deeper than conscious thought. The doorbell interrupted mid-phrase. Arthur stood outside with a leather portfolio tucked under his arm, punctual as always. Ready for our quarterly review? His eyes crinkled at the corners, reminding me of Dad. Coffee first. I waved him toward the kitchen. I made that dark roast you like. While he poured, I gathered my notes. The Stanford acceptance letter sat atop the pile. Masters in Nonprofit Management. Classes started next week. Arthur settled at my small dining table, spreading financial statements between us. Unlike the tense meeting with Lorraine the year before, this felt collaborative, even comfortable. The municipal bonds yielded better than expected. He pointed to a highlighted section. What do you think about diversifying into some international funds? I studied the prospectus he slid toward me. What's the political stability in these regions? And the fee structure seems high. Arthur's eyebrows lifted slightly. Good questions. The management expenses eat about 1.8% annually, which is steep. Let me find alternatives. The conversation continued this way. Him proposing, me questioning, both of us deciding together. No blind trust, no signatures without understanding. The fatal flaw that had nearly destroyed me was now transformed into its opposite, informed vigilance. Later, I drove to Dr. Reed's office for our monthly session. The cognitive behavioral therapy techniques had helped me process the trauma, though I still flinched at certain triggers. The smell of expensive perfume like Lorraine's, the sound of a grandfather clock ticking. How are the nightmares? Dr. Reed asked after I settled into her soft leather chair. Down to maybe once a week. I twisted a tissue between my fingers. Last night I dreamed about the piano again, but this time I was playing it, even with the pink paint. She nodded. That's progress. You're reclaiming what was taken. On my drive home, I made a quick detour to FedEx, sending an overnight package to Austin. Inside, a first-class plane ticket for Olivia to visit San Francisco next weekend. The note read simply, 4 nights in a real bed. No lies about mold, just friendship. H. The final piece fell into place 3 weeks later. I was in my apartment, spreadsheets scattered across the coffee table, when Arthur called. It's official, he said. The Morgan West Foundation has its 501(c)(3) status. The $500,000 in punitive damages is fully transferred to the foundation account. A wave of something, closure perhaps or purpose, washed over me. It's really happening. Your mother would be proud, Harmony. Your father, too. 3 years passed in a blink. I stood at a podium in the Stanford Alumni Center ballroom, facing 200 guests at our foundation's first major fundraiser. The room buzzed with energy and checkbooks, $50,000 already pledged tonight. In the front row, Arthur beamed. Beside him sat Olivia, who had flown in from Austin where she now managed our Texas grant program. They had both weathered the storm with me and were now witnesses to what had risen from those ruins. The Morgan West Foundation isn't just about money, I told the crowd. My voice was steady. It's about what happens when financial crisis collides with family betrayal. Last year, we helped 38 college students facing homelessness after family breakdowns. We provided emergency housing grants, legal assistance, and trauma counseling. I scanned the familiar and unfamiliar faces. Resilience isn't just about surviving what's thrown at you. It's about knowing you are worth rescuing. And then, it's about turning around and building a sanctuary for the next person in line. The applause washed over me like sunlight through bay windows. I was 28 now, fully in control of my inheritance, my education completed. But more importantly, I had built something my parents never could have imagined, a legacy born from loss, a sanctuary forged from betrayal. And in this moment, I was certain. I was my mother's daughter. I was my father's child. But mostly, finally, I was entirely my own.